Welcome, friends, to At Home with Theosophy. We are starting today a new series based on the book Foundations of the Esoteric Philosophy by Ianthe Hoskins. The name of the series is Fundamental Teachings in the Secret Doctrine. As you will see, we are going to explore some of the basic principles in the Secret Doctrine as well as how to study it.
Ianthe Hoskins was a theosophist in England, the TS England, and she just passed away in the last 20 years, I think.
Yes.
So she's a relatively modern theosophist, yes.
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Introduction. The subtitle to the Secret Doctrine is The Synthesis of Science, Religion, and Philosophy. At the time of the writing, there was a departure of these three disciplines from the unitive study with which they originated in all ancient traditions, Eastern religions and Greek philosophies. The fear was that the disciplines were becoming more separate and dogmatic without an ability to reconcile. This is from, Doss McDavid did a talk on how to study the Secret Doctrine or the keys to the Secret Doctrine. And there's an audio file on the TSA website, which Pablo will send out with the link for the recording of this. He'll also send the link for the audio of Doss's talk. He does a great job of giving an overview of how to look at the Secret Doctrine, why it was written, and some key tips to how to approach the study of the Secret Doctrine. So he says here, when we think about the study of the Secret Doctrine, it is helpful to acquire a general knowledge of these areas, science, religion, and philosophy. So it doesn't mean you have to be well-versed in all those areas, although it probably would make it a little easier. But to know that that's what this is based on, instead of coming to it like I did, not knowing anything about these areas and wondering why it was such a foreign language to me.
And as Doss says there, the problem with the modern approach to knowledge is that it is very specialized, and being so specialized, it becomes further and further, or the different branches of knowledge become further and further away from each other. So part of what HPB wanted to do is to bring, as the subtitle says, a synthesis, a worldview that could incorporate a scientific element, a philosophical one, and also a religious or spiritual one.
This brings to mind, or an analogy in the world today, how our doctors are now so specialized. You know, before the doctors knew pretty much something about the whole human body, or could extrapolate from what was going on in the hand, how it might work in the foot. But now you have doctors that know, the hand and know nothing about the rest of the body. So there's a disconnect there, you could say, in healing or in doctoring of the body. And the same thing here, there was a fear of this. So this is where HPB came to write The Secret Doctrine. So Doss goes on to say, to understand a general map of the territory is to know that the Secret Doctrine is based on a secret Eastern text called the Book of Zion. It is in 2 volumes, Cosmogenesis and Anthropogenesis, so the beginning of the universe and the beginning of man. There are 7 stanzas in Cosmogenesis and 12 stanzas in Anthropogenesis. Now we're focusing on Cosmogenesis here. So in this book there are 3 sections, well, in each book. So in this book there's the first section is based on the stanzas from the Book of Zion. And this is kind of in 2 parts. The first part is this poetic language that that comes from the stanzas, and then HPB adds her commentaries here. The second part is the symbolism as it appears in world religions. And if we look at in all world religions, or in the world religions, there is a story about the beginning of the universe. There's a story about the beginning of man or how man came to be. There's a story about the evolution or the salvation of man. So those things are all worded in symbolism and some allegory and basically storytelling. So that's what this part, and if we keep that in mind when we read the stanzas when we read the stanzas in the Secret Doctrine, then we'll have a better idea of why the wording is as it is. And then the third part is the science as it relates to the Secret Doctrine. And this we have to remember, it was the science of the day. So it was the science of the 1880s, you know, this type of science. But what HPB does is she mentions some things, or she talks about things that later, not until the last century, the 1900s, was it discovered. And there's still some things that science hasn't quite caught up on that she mentions in the Secret Doctrine.
Actually, right now, science, many scientists, especially in the field of cosmology, for example, that is basically what we are going to pay more attention to. Current scientists are beginning to develop alternative theories and hypotheses that are very close to what HPB wrote in the Secret Doctrine. So all this is interesting because I think it gives some authority to the source of knowledge that we find in this book.
Okay, in the foreword, Ianthe Hoskins tells us, Blavatsky repeatedly affirmed both the antiquity and the universality of these teachings. For herself, she claimed only the role of writer and transmitter. In Blavatsky's words, these truths are in no sense put forward as a revelation, nor does the author claim the position of a revealer of mystic lore, now made public for the first time in world's history. What is now attempted is to gather the oldest tenets together and to make of them one harmonious and unbroken whole. So if we keep in mind for the first time in world's history, so this is in the late 1800s, this is the first time that all this information has been brought together. And so she's doing it, not only does she have to bring it together, she has to explain why it's here and where it comes from in the wording of that time. So we have to remember the time period, what was there at that time, and at that time there was only esoteric Buddhism and Isis Unveiled from which this type of information could be compared to, and that the students of the time, this is what they had as, that these two sources is what they had as a basis to work from.
Yes, and some articles in the Theosophies, but as she says there, part of what she wants to do in the Secret Doctrine is to show that there is a wisdom, ancient wisdom, or you know, sometimes they call it ageless, because the idea of ancient is that it was with humanity since the very beginning. You know, even in the 19th century when this was written, most people thought that there was nothing in the past that was of value, because we grow and develop science and all that, and we know much better than people in the past. Part of what HPB tried to do is to show that ancient people had a wisdom that was there with humanity always, and she, in the Secret Doctrine, she brought together all these different fragments using the teachings that she learned from her teachers, what she called the esoteric philosophy, and then using this as a skeleton, she showed how all the different religions and religious teachings and philosophical teachings, even scientific, can fit together.
And she mentions this is a very small portion of what is out there, and this is all that could be shared at this time, just because of the position that humanity is at this time.
Mm-hmm. So Ed is asking, are there any modern works not based on the secret doctrine that cover the same material? Well, you know, after the secret doctrine was written, the secret doctrine was, and the work in the Theosophical Society in general, it was the first time when a systematic approach to science and spirituality was presented. So today there are many branches that study science and spirituality in one way or the other. Even the Dalai Lama is comparing or trying to look at the scientific developments in terms of spirituality. Same with religions. Comparative religion at the time was a new development, and most of the religions were being compared by Christians with the intention of showing how Christianity is better than the other religions. So the TS was the first in trying to look at all religions, thinking that they all have value. And then same with mythology, for example. Myths were thought to be superstitions. Blavatsky wrote far before Campbell, for example, who is a more or less modern scholar, Joseph Campbell, that is trying, that his work was showing that there is a wisdom in the myths and not just superstition. So I think what happened is that Blavatsky presented all this, and then different people took different branches and specialized in those branches.
And that's what the uniqueness of Blavatsky's abilities or doings at this time was, that it's not just what people are able to do now, where it's one branch or one specific aspect, that this is the whole, the whole of it.
Yeah, even the idea of looking at religious teachings not as literal, but more as symbolical, allegorical, that was not very common at all, and this HPB wrote quite a bit about this, and today many people look at the religious teachings in a more allegorical way.
And if you read the commentaries after the stanzas, you'll see that that's what they're all about. And if for me, it was really helpful to keep this in mind, that she's trying to explain, she's trying to
prove,
justify, to prove, to justify that this is what I'm saying here, this is here, and it's here, and it's here. So that's why you see, you know, Chinese and the Kabbalah and mythology and everything in there, which is confusing to us, but it's a way to, like I said, to justify what she's writing.
All right, so let us...
Hang on 1 second. Yeah. There we go. Okay. All right, so now we go into the 4 basic ideas, and this is one of, if you listen to Doss McDavid's talk, you'll see that he calls them laundry lists. I don't know if that's a common term when reading The Secret Doctrine, but he breaks things down into laundry lists. So there are 3 fundamental propositions. There's these 4 basic ideas. So this is where we're starting, is with the 4 basic ideas. And the first one is...
Well, before we let us see where the 4 basic ideas come from.
There is a small but invaluable collection of notes written down at the time by Commander Robert Bowen, published separately as a booklet entitled Madame Blavatsky on How to Study Theosophy. It is from these notes that we learn not only the way in which, in her view, one should approach the study, the attitude and expectations one should bring to it, but further, the order in which the essential statements are to be taken before embarking on the whole work. In addition, she places before the student the basic ideas which should be kept permanently in mind.
So these basic ideas came from a conversation that she had with a group of students, and Robert Bowen wrote them down. You can find them in this little pamphlet, Madame Blavatsky on How to Study Theosophy.
On the internet.
Yeah, it is available on the internet. So today we are going to explore the 4 ideas.
In the Bowen Notes, Madame Blavatsky repeated many times that the study of the secret doctrine could not give a final and complete picture of the universe. It is meant, she said, to lead towards the truth. As an aid to progressive understanding, she then outlined 4 basic ideas which the student should never lose from view. Being given spontaneously, these ideas are presented in simpler language than in the great works, and may therefore serve as a preparation for some of the more complex phraseology of the fuller statements.
Yes, so this idea that the secret doctrine is meant to lead to the truth, it's an important idea because as we are going to see, what Blavatsky is trying to do is to generate a certain kind of process of inquiry which will allow us to have insights into truth, an insight that doesn't come merely from reading information. From reading information we can get knowledge and accumulate it in our memory, but insights come when we look at the information in a specific way. So she says truth is not on the paper, it's not in the words. You can have a perception of truth only through these insights. And that can happen if you approach the secret doctrine in this way, which is what we are going to explore today.
Right. Many times our upbringing has taught us that there are experts. And if we read what the experts say and we memorize what they say and we follow what they say, then we'll get to what they say. In this instance, that's not the case at all. We could read all these truths written down everywhere, but they're really not truths until we're able to experience them or perceive them ourselves. Okay, here we go. First basic idea, the fundamental unity of all existence. The radical unity of the ultimate essence of each constituent part of compounds in nature, from star to mineral atom, from the highest Dian Chohan to the smallest infusorium, in the fullest acceptation of the term, and whether applied to the spiritual, intellectual, or physical worlds, this unity is the one fundamental law in occult science. So she's talking about basically what the biggest thing you can think of, which is the highest Dian Chohan, down to the smallest bacteria or the smallest even particle, is all the same, or there's a unity, this fundamental law that goes through it.
Yes, as we see all kinds of diversity in the universe, and naturally we assume that all this diversity is separate and different from, each entity different from each other. So it is counterintuitive to say that all this is actually different aspects of a unity. And this is the fundamental law, as she says, in occult science, that there is a unity behind all this diversity of manifestations. And this is essential, as we are going to see. It's the first basic idea that Blavatsky says we have to grasp, and we will see different aspects of it.
And just as a practice, one of 2 meditations that are good to get the idea of this, or to let it sink in, is to meditate from see all the diversity and meditate back to a unity, and then the opposite, and just to get an idea of that feeling of that unitive feeling there.
Yeah, because we see all our bodies separate, but if we go at the level of the atoms, for example, we are constantly exchanging atoms with everything around, and the atom that is in my brain may have been in a squirrel yesterday that I just, breathed in. And so if you visualize even on the physical plane, the reality as these constantly exchanging atoms, you start getting a sense of, well, we are not so separate as we think. As we are going to see, this unity is even more radical than that. But this is an example of what Michelle was saying.
Right, and simply, I guess I personally have a hard time feeling this oneness, this true oneness, with everything, or this unity, but I can understand that when I eat, I take up the atoms of what I ate, or when I drink something, or if I'm in a room, I can sense the emotions of other people, or even sometimes catch a thought form from other people. So those are a sharing that, not just coming in, but also I share on myself. The unity is a thing altogether different from the common notion of unity, as when we say that a nation or an army is united, or that this planet is united to that by lines of magnetic force or the like. The teaching is not that. It is that existence is one thing, not any collection of things linked together. Fundamentally, there is one being.
So you see that normally when we say that something is united, we are saying that it's connected. And people today may have this sense of we are all connected. And that is okay. But Blavatsky says here that the unity she's talking about is something that is far deeper, goes far deeper. It's not just that there are isolated entities that somehow are they all connected or affecting each other. All these individual entities are just one being, are different aspects of one being.
And the example of that is gold. If we take gold, its essence can be formed or shaped into many different forms, but it is still gold. Its essence is still gold. So all that is one, as it can be melted back into its source.
Yeah, so in this example, we say that there is this essence, as Blavatsky was saying in the previous quote, that is the same everywhere. Now, this is an example of a material essence that is everywhere. Think of gold also as mind, for example. All the different forms that our minds assume are actually different forms of the universal mind, for example. Or think of this at the level of consciousness. Any individual consciousness, perception that we have are simply different forms of the one consciousness. So you can apply this analogy on different levels and have, as Michelle said, a certain sense of what this means.
Another, Ed says, a unity is not a connection. And that's a really good way of putting it. I can feel a connection to everybody and everything or all beings, but to really feel that I am the same or I am that being, I guess, is a little more difficult on my part.
Yeah, in general, we may be able to describe the unity as something that is out there. Then the challenge is to realize that the unity out there is me. That if we are saying everything is one, that means that I am that oneness, and you and her and everything. Right. So first we start looking at this as a concept out there, and then the challenge is to start interpreting this in terms of a first-person experience.
Right, as opposed to the third-person experience. And then the other example, or the other analogy, is cells of a body. And those cells, we would never think of laying out the individual cells and making a liver or making a heart and then putting those all together to make a human being. Well, I know science tries to do that. But as far as that unity, if my body is a unity, it's a unity where a single cell really can't live without the rest of it. And that's how this unity or this fundamental one being is thought of.
Yeah, if you take any cell outside of the body, the cell will die. So the cell is an individuality, you could say, but it's intrinsically part of the whole being. Take it out and then it dies. So similarly with this, the unity is not just a composition of individual beings. Each individual being is a manifestation of this unity and is intrinsically part of that unity.
The being has two aspects, positive and negative. The positive is spirit or consciousness. The negative is substance, the subject of consciousness. The being is the absolute in its primary manifestation. Being absolute, there is nothing outside. It is all being.
So basically, the idea here is that everything is part of this unity. Sometimes we tend to think that consciousness is reality and matter is illusion. And both consciousness and matter, if you know, they are both illusions, if we want to call them illusions, in the sense that they are two aspects of the one being. So everything, good and evil, light and darkness, positive and negative, these are all temporary aspects of the one being. There is nothing outside of it.
It is indivisible, else it would not be absolute. If a portion could be separated, that remaining could not be absolute, because there would at once arise the question of comparison between it and the separated part. Comparison is incompatible with any idea of absoluteness. Therefore, it is clear that the fundamental one existence or absolute being must be the reality in every form there is. When I was studying or going through this stuff to prepare for tonight, an idea hit me is as I compare myself to others, or as I compare others to myself or each other, there can't be that unity. Every time I compare, I separate. Every time I name, I separate. So it's really a practice, a daily practice, and this is one of the other ones, a daily practice of finding the fundamental unity is trying to live or walk or work without comparing, without naming, without justifying, without causing this separateness.
Yes, because the mind that perceives a separation is not the mind that can perceive unity. Or we should say the aspect of the mind that is constantly separating cannot perceive unity. This is what we call in Theosophy the lower mind or the higher mind, the concrete mind and the abstract mind. So in order to have a sense of this unity that we are part of, a good training is to stop being so focused on the part of the mind that is constantly separating. And this will allow us, as Michelle says, to little by little have a sense of that unity. But also from a metaphysical point of view, nothing is absolute if there is something that is not part of that absolute. Absolute means the totality, you know. So in many religions, they separate good and evil. There is God, and then there is the devil. That God that is opposed to the devil cannot be absolute. The absolute is rather like the zero, in which +1 and -1 are contained. Once you manifest one, you also manifest the -1, you know, the positive and negative. When we talk about the absolute, we are talking about the synthesis of all the opposites.
And I don't know if I'm going off track, you can stop me. But what this made me think about was the manifestation of the universe, where we have a unity, and from that unity, we have a differentiation is like the first stage. And from that differentiation, we have a polarization. And from that polarization, we have a duality. So it doesn't go from, you know, absolute down to a duality. There are some stages. And to me, that's the way we can look at how we get to separateness from a unified state.
Yes, and we will explore that next week with the first fundamental proposition.
Yeah, always ahead of myself. All right, the atom, the man, the God are each separately as well as all collectively absolute being in their last analysis. That is their real individuality. It is this idea which must be held always in the background of the mind to form the basis for every conception that arises from the study of the secret doctrine. The moment one lets it go, and it is most easy to do so when engaged in any of the many intricate aspects of the esoteric philosophy, the idea of separation supervenes and the study loses its value. So this is really where one-pointedness or concentration comes in, is to keep this fundamental unity as an ideal when we're reading through the secret doctrine.
Yeah, you see, Blavatsky is quite radical here. She says that as soon as we lose sight of this, when we are lost in all the details and the intricate aspects of the esoteric philosophy, and then we start looking at that from the point of separation, she says the study loses its value. So it's useless to study from that point of view. Don't waste your time if you are going to study from that point of view. You know, we could rephrase this in those ways. So why is it? You know, you can certainly study the secret doctrine and learn about the first logos, the third, the hierarchies of beings.
And memorize everything.
Without ever thinking of unity. But why is it that the study loses its value? Well, because HPV doesn't want you to just accumulate information. She wants you to have an insight into truth. And that approach will never bring an insight, you know, of truth. Of course, at the beginning, when we are just trying to understand the concepts, we will lose the idea of unity. But that is only at the preliminary stage. Once we get a hold of the main concepts, we should read the secret doctrine thinking of this one being, which is ourselves, and which everything, as we are going to say in the other ideas, everything is within this one being.
And I think it's really hard for our conceptual mind to think that there is more to be gained from an insight, from a higher order learning, because we see that there is so much knowledge out there that we can't get enough of it. So how can any insight help me to get more if I can't accumulate enough on this physical plane? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a paradox that we have to, you know, trust.
Yeah, because also that's a good point in the sense that the insight doesn't necessarily bring more information. The insight brings a realization of truth in the sense of what we are not and what we are. So all the different details in the secret doctrine, in one way or the other, can help us when we have an insight while working on this, can help us break our ideas that we are this little body, this little ego, personality with these desires. So yeah, at the level of information, there is plenty of information,
right.
But the insight is of a different quality. So it says this is the secret in the secret doctrine, or the secret doctrine.
No, he says it's the secret doctrine, not the secret doctrine.
Oh, I see. Yes.
Ooh, I thought my eyes were not working good. Every last atom, so sorry, we kind of jumped there.
Yes.
So we're on the second basic idea, no dead matter. Every last atom is alive. It cannot be otherwise, since every atom is itself fundamentally absolute being. Nature taken in its abstract sense cannot be unconscious, as it is the emanation from and thus an aspect on the manifested plane of the absolute consciousness.
So this, you know, in science, the idea is that consciousness is a byproduct of certain biological activities. So there may be consciousness or there may not be consciousness in entities. But the esoteric philosophy says that consciousness is in the very fabric of matter. Just as science discovered that matter and energy are not two different things, and this is something that the secret doctrine postulated before science came to that realization, the secret doctrine is saying something more. Not only matter and energy are two aspects of the same, consciousness is also an aspect of the same. Matter, energy, and consciousness are all intrinsic parts of the source of the universe. Therefore, there can be nothing that has not some kind of matter, some kind of energy, and some kind of consciousness.
In different proportions.
And in different levels of manifestation, physical and non-physical.
Therefore, there is no such thing as spaces of ether or akasha, or call it what you like, in which angels and elementals disport themselves like trout in water. That's a common idea. The true idea shows every atom of substance, no matter of what plane, to be in itself a life.
So this is, I think what she tried to say there is that since everything is alive, we are constantly interacting with life. Normally we think there is a vacuum between me and the microphone. Of course, from the point of view of quantum physics, right now, we know that there is no emptiness. This is something that Blavatsky said in The Secret Doctrine. Space is substance. There is nowhere 1 inch of space that is not substance. In quantum physics, they call it, the quantum soup or this field of probability, etc. So the idea is that we are constantly moving on top of some kind of life on top of life, just as we are alive.
Right, like there's no, we see the skin as a separation between me and you. And there isn't that. So if everything, even the space, is alive or part of life, then we're constantly being bathed in this consciousness, or in this life. But
also we breathe in life. We are conscious because our cells are alive. So the whole thing is life moving within life and interacting with life. There is nothing that is, not alive, inorganic,
right,
etc.
Truly separated. And I think that's hard for us to I imagine, I'm thinking myself, it's hard to imagine, because I can separate things. I can put things in boxes and I can separate it by that wall. So to switch to a way of thinking that everything is more fluid doesn't make sense to my, my concept.
Yeah, that's why all this requires meditation. It's not just reading and learning to repeat the concepts.
Right. So each of these ideas can be a source of meditation, or each of these, because these are the writings, what we have up here. We have the whole writing of each of the ideas. So these ideas can be a source or an inspiration for a daily meditation. Okay, inorganic substance means simply that the latent life slumbering in the molecules of so-called inert matter is incognizable. All is life, and every atom of even mineral dust is a life, though beyond our comprehension and perception, because it is outside the range of laws known to those who reject occultism.
So, in science, they would typically say that there are things that are not alive, and certainly an atom is not alive, or minerals. But their definition of life is very narrow. They define life arbitrarily. They define life as something that is similar to what they decide that is alive. Life is that which allows organisms to reproduce themselves. Well, that's an arbitrary definition. The point here is that there is a principle there of life and consciousness, but it is not quite evident on the physical plane. So science, unless it expands its means of measurement, basically, to non-physical planes, science is not going to be able to recognize life in, what is supposed to be inorganic. But Blavatsky says there is a principle of life, not so evident on the physical plane, but it's more evident on the inner planes. And of course, some experiments in quantum physics seem to suggest that even the quantum particles have some kind of consciousness, although that is more for philosophers to think about rather than the scientists. This idea is controversial among scientists, but certainly there are some hints that seem to indicate that. So it's interesting that they are learning how to look into that. So yeah, let's go on.
Okay. Okay, that was the second basic idea. Now we're going into the third one, which is man is the microcosm. Man as a whole contains every element that is found in the universe, and there is nothing in the macrocosm that is not in the microcosm. As he is so, then all the hierarchies of the heavens exist within him. This seems to be one of the ideas that is a little more closer to understand. The New Age caught hold of this. You know, we are gods. It's at what level, though, this is talking about and what level the New Age is talking about. We are gods at our essence. Me, this person right here, as Pablo, I always hear him say this example, is not a god, but my essence is. So that's a little better understanding.
Yes, so the basic idea here is that within ourselves, there are every element that is available in the universe. And then she says, so all the angels, so, you know, to put it in more Christian terms that many of us are more familiar with, all the angels that seem to be entities out there, they are within you. This goes along the idea of unity. You know, when we study all the different hierarchies of celestial beings, we tend to think celestial beings are out there, I am here, I'm separate, we are different. And then, as Blavatsky says, from that point of view, we are not going to have an insight into the truth. So first we should realize that me is not this physical body, that me is the one being. This is what we said in the first idea. Therefore, all the different celestial beings are within myself. And second, this little aspect of myself, that is this body that I call my body, is a mirror of the universe. So all the celestial beings have a part of themselves within myself. Every element in the universe has a part within this particular body or personality. So you see how everything is connected, or rather than connected, is interlaced in a sense.
And this is unique to man, the microcosm that from the Dion Chohans down to the minerals, this is the meeting ground of the universe is within man.
Yeah, in Hermeticism, I think they used to define a human being as the place where heaven and earth, kiss. Yeah. And that is because in a human being, you have the material aspect in its densest form, the physical matter, and you have the spiritual aspect in its subtlest form, and all the levels within. An angel, for example, doesn't have a physical body, or an animal doesn't have the spiritual nature awakened, or lower,
right.
plants, etc.
There's potentialities there, but it's in man, or in man with the capital M, that all these are there.
Yeah. So we are a mirror of the whole universe. That's what this quote says. Everything that is in the universe can be found in a human being.
Right. Ed asks, how is the term element used?
Yeah, I think she's using it there in a general way. Any force, state of consciousness, state of matter, anything that exists in the universe is represented in a human being as a reflection. So element in a general way.
And this is one of the question here is one of the things that we have to remember when we read the Secret Doctrine, or really any theosophy for that matter, is we have to take the words. We can't take one word and rely on it to mean the same thing throughout the book, or from book to book. So we kind of have to, in some places we have to just extrapolate or think, okay, does this mean this? Does this mean that? And work on that.
Yeah, we have to get it from the context.
The 7 occult powers in the microcosm correspond with, or are the counterparts of, the occult powers in the macrocosm. The mental and spiritual consciousness of the individual becomes the general consciousness of the Brahman, when the barrier of individuality is wholly removed, and when the 7 powers in the microcosm are placed in rapport with the 7 powers in the macrocosm.
This is from Subha Rao, who was a theosophist at the time of Blavatsky, and actually Blavatsky quoted this in one of her articles, so that's why we are bringing it here. So this is an interesting example of what we were talking about.
Right, that all the powers that we have, or all the powers that are available, are divine.
Mm-hmm. And they are, as he says, when we remove the barrier of our sense of individuality, we are Brahman, Brahman being the divine. And the same powers that create a cosmos or a solar system or a planet, they are within us. Of course, they are, when we say if by us we mean this body has a reflection of those powers. So we can create not a solar system, we can create, we have reshaped the world around us. But when we can raise our consciousness to the higher levels, then we can become co-creators just as the logos of a system, as the divinity of a system, because we are part of the logos, we are not different.
And that's a good thing to remember, or a daily practice throughout the day, to remember that we have these potentialities to be co-creators. We just have to get, like it says, the barriers, and our barriers are the separateness. So if we remember that fundamental existence and the fundamental unity in existence, then we start to remove those barriers that are keeping these powers at bay.
Mm-hmm.
Man was produced in the image of God, or divine nature. Every organ in the universe is a sentient entity which communicates with the brain stuff on the plane of divine thought, and every cell in the human organism mysteriously corresponds with a like cell in the divine organism, the manifested universe. Only the latter cell assumes in the macrocosm the gigantic proportions of an intelligent unit in this or that hierarchy of beings.
So, in some traditions there is the idea of a cosmic, the celestial man or the cosmic man, the idea that the universe is in itself a human being, but a cosmic human being. And I think Blavatsky is referring to that here. The idea that the universe has its own organs and cells, just as we do, and it has its own divine intelligence, and the different angels are like, just as we have neurotransmitters, which are the messengers that bring from consciousness the message from consciousness into matter. There are celestial beings that are the messengers of the divine thought that bring the plan of the divine thought into matter. So the idea is that there is this cosmos, this organism, cosmic organism, and all our cells, all our principles, all our states of consciousness are connected to the states of consciousness and cells and principles, in quotation marks, of the cosmos.
But in truth, there is neither macrocosm nor microcosm, but one existence. Great and small are such only as viewed by a limited consciousness. So as soon as we come out of this unitive thinking, as soon as there's a thought created that, like a box created, a comparison, a container, then we come out of that one existence, and we are into the world of illusions that we are a microcosm, that there is a macrocosm, that we are limited, that there is unlimitedlessness, so this is part of the meditation that I had mentioned earlier, once we can get back to that unitive state, we can see that this is an illusion, and these are just words or comparisons or concepts to understand it, on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. So you see here, HPB herself is coming back to the unity once and again. She said, never lose sight of the unity. And then she gives the second truth, that everything is alive, etc. And then she goes back to unity. And here she talks about the macrocosm and the microcosm, and then she goes back to unity. So I think this shows how unity was an essential aspect in her consciousness, but also it shows us the way to work with this. So you can look at the macrocosm and the microcosm, and you can study the relationships and all that, but never too deep as to lose sight of the fact that macro and micro are not different. They are just one, and our limited consciousness is seeing the big or the small as different.
Right.
So constantly come back to that.
And we usually have a tendency to think that big is better and small is not. So then we're judging about this kind of stuff. So, I was going to say that the fact that Blavatsky follows this all through the four ideas, follows the fundamental law of unity through these four ideas is kind of a strong point, because she doesn't always do that. She doesn't always follow the thread all the way through something that she writes, or because she writes it's here and there and we have to gather it together. So this is something that obviously is important. All right, the fourth basic idea, the great Hermetic axiom. As above, so below. As in the inner, so is the outer. As is the greater, so is the small. As it is above, so it is below. There is but one life and law, and he that worketh it is one. Nothing is inner, nothing is outer. Nothing is great, nothing is small. Nothing is high, nothing is low in this divine economy. That's really nice words, just as they are.
Yeah, so here, the principle, the general principle, well, is expressed there. There is this correspondence, but you see she did it again. She talks about, as it is above, so below, high, low, and then she undoes that by saying, but nothing is higher, nothing is lower. So again, this idea of you can look at the separation, you can look at the differentiation, but always in the context of the unity. So let's see what this means.
Everything in the universe follows analogy. As above, so below. That which takes place on the spiritual plane repeats itself on the cosmic plane. Concretion follows the lines of abstraction. Corresponding to the highest must be the lowest, the material to the spiritual.
So this is called sometimes the law of analogies or correspondences. Basically saying that the same kind of processes that we see in the cosmos, we can see in a human being, we can see in a plant, we can see in an atom. Everywhere there is a general idea that the whole cosmos follows.
And if we can remain in this unity, this thought of unity, we can then watch things and look at them, and we'll talk about this when we get to the three fundamental propositions, that there's a pattern, there's a repetition, there's a way that continues. It's not just a new thing here and then a set of rules here and then this here, that it all truly fits together. But we can't see that unless we keep in mind this unity.
Yes, it's the effort to perceive the patterns, as Michelle was saying. Once we see the patterns, we begin to recognize them. They, of course, apply in different ways to a human being or a planet, But as we develop the ability to think in a more abstract way, we can see the patterns and how you see a correspondence between a planet and a human being.
Okay, Noy says, I'm going to put my glasses on for this one. Although for purposes, and he's getting this from How to Study Theosophy, the Bowen notes, although for purposes of study we divide the field of esoteric science into various aspects, it must constantly be reaffirmed that the aspects are facets of unity. The moment one lets this idea slip from the mind, the idea of separation supervenes and the study loses its value.
Mm-hmm. And then Ed says there that the universe is fractal.
I'm sorry, Ed.
Yeah, and yes, that's exactly the idea. You know, a fractal is a geometrical figure or pattern that repeats itself on all different levels.
Right, but maintains
the same basic shape, and it just grows maintaining the same basic shape. So at any point in the fractal, you see the same structure. So similarly, we could say that the laws of the universe are fractals in that sense.
Nature follows the same groove from the creation of a universe down to that of a mosquito. In studying esoteric cosmogony, keep a spiritual eye upon the physiological process of human birth. Proceed from cause to effect, establishing as you go along analogies between the birth of a man and that of a world.
So this is an example taken from one of Blavatsky's teachers of how this applies. And actually Blavatsky did this in The Secret Doctrine. She puts The Secret Doctrine, or no, in her esoteric writings, I think it was, she puts two columns and the different stages in the formation of a world, and then the different stages in the formation of an embryo and a fetus, and then she correlates them, and you can see how there is a correlation there. So this, besides the fact of bringing this idea of unity, is also a way to stimulate a kind of thinking that is more embracing, that is more abstract, that is trying to break through the separation and the specialization that we were talking about. Our minds have to be trained so that the minds can perceive the idea of unity. Of course, unity can be experienced in states beyond the mind, but the mind has to have the ability to understand and to retain that impression. So this kind of study is stimulating that aspect of our minds that can perceive this.
This made me think of when as a mom, I wanted my kids to be able to think. You know, they can follow directions very well, but if they can't see the patterns or the causes or the effects that happen with the things that they do or the way that they think, then they're kind of lost and they're constantly not realizing why something happened. So if we can keep this idea of, and hopefully we've moved past the thinking of a teenager, if we can keep this idea that it's important that from the other way around, that if we think from a wider perspective, then we're able to see the patterns, and from seeing the patterns, we can see that it's all one. Whoops.
So the last statement that we are going to see,
Okay, sorry, I didn't know you were ready. No matter what one takes as study in the secret doctrine, one must correlate it with those four basic ideas.
So that's the concluding words of HPB when dealing with the basic idea. If we can follow this advice and study the secret doctrine, trying to look at everything when there is a description of the cosmos, think of it as a description of yourself. Then work and try to compare the manifestation of the cosmos to the manifestation of ideas in your mind. For example, if you do this work, then you start having this intuitive perception of the unity and all these things that we were talking about. And then the secret doctrine becomes invaluable, not as a source of information, which is what HPV said at the beginning. It's not that you are going to learn the truth from the book. It becomes a way to raise your consciousness so that you have insights.
So a source of inspiration, a source of a practice, a meditation to get insights, and not just from the secret doctrine, but from life itself.
All right, so that's what we had prepared for today. Are there any other comments or questions? You can write them there in the chat box, or you can use your mic if you have a microphone and you know how to use it. It says a
trigger to higher consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. I see Deborah is
typing away.
Yeah.
It is very poetic. Yes, absolutely. And once we understand what the poetic nature of the language, the symbolism behind the poetic nature of the language, then it becomes even more beautiful.
And also the purpose of poetic language and allegorical language is to give room to our own perceptions again. You know, when something is very plain, it's difficult to see beyond the plainness of the words. But when something is more allegorical or poetic, or you know, with more imagery, you can meditate on that. You can ponder over it, and then that will lead you into new vistas, you know, into aspects that are not contained in the words. So I think that's part of why HPV wrote with the style that she wrote.
Which is the way that education used to be. It's not this way now. Now we feel that we want to cram so much knowledge into ourselves that we have to shorten everything to a little snippet, and then that is what we remember, instead of teaching us how to think. So we're not thinking beings, we're just remotely speaking. We're memorizing, you know, spitting out beings.
Yeah, so, because our education is based on incorporating information. So from that point of view, it is efficient. For the spiritual life and to be a good human being, we need more than.
But I don't even think it's efficient from that standpoint, because you don't create beings that are able to think. You create beings that are able to follow. So Esther says, can you just talk to boundaries that are so much focused on in psychotherapy networks?
I'm not familiar with psychotherapy networks. I don't know if by boundaries you are referring to what we read from the quote in Subarro, or if this is a specific technical concept that they use in psychotherapy networks. What I could say, generally speaking, is that, you know, at least psychologically and spiritually, boundaries are self-imposed. And, you know, I separate myself from the others psychologically by saying, this is my job. Don't mess with my job. This is my family. This is my position. This is my name. These are my ideas. Don't challenge this. So we generate a boundary that protects our sense of identity.
So, but one of the things in psychotherapy is that they teach is to have boundaries. So there are, you know, there's how I interact with a stranger is different from how I interact with a friend, is different from how I interact with family. And so those boundaries are sometimes needed for a healthy psychology. I don't know if
yes, well, because that's where I was going. From, you know, as long as we live within our individuality, within our personal ego, we need to protect our personal ego. Yeah. So our personal ego is it's a protection and it is a limitation. As long as we live within the personal ego, there will be sorrow and joy. We cannot get rid of sorrow because that's part of what the personal ego is. So in psychology, many times what they try to do is to generate a healthy ego, or as healthy as possible. Now, what spirituality begins when we start learning how to live beyond in a transpersonal state of consciousness. And then boundaries are not so necessary because our identity is not at that level. Of course, for practical purposes, there are some boundaries that are necessary, but not psychologically. So I would say that spirituality is the work to break through the boundaries so that we can realize that we are the whole. We are the hurt, the person that is hurting, and the person that is hurting. But that, of course, is a work that we little by little grow into.
Right, it's gradual. We just don't open ourselves up if we don't have that insight. And the workings of reincarnation, of karma, of love, of all that can help us better understand conceptually first about why things happen to us, or why we need these boundaries. But eventually, and with work, like Pablo said, breaking down those boundaries is the next step. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely not a step if we're not healthy or mature or strong, or even it can even happen in, we could be fine and then we could go through a crisis, and in that crisis we may need to set up boundaries and then come back and work from a different standpoint.
Yeah, we have to use our common sense. Basically, boundaries protect us but also limit us. So we should try to let go of boundaries as much as possible. And then, be rational and say, okay, I cannot handle this. I may need to put a boundary. Do it, but also be aware that that is limiting you. That by doing that, you are protecting yourself, but also you are limiting yourself, so that you can try to move beyond that as soon as possible, or you start working so that breaking down those boundaries is possible.
Yeah, that it's a temporary boundary, mm-hmm. and not a permanent boundary.
Yeah.
Even with those that we have strong emotions or conflict with.
Mm-hmm. And then
Noy says compassion and kindness to self, other people, and nature.
Mm-hmm. Because self, other people, and nature are all one.
Right.
That again, we normally, these boundaries make me perceive the world through this body. And then I say, I am this body. If I didn't have those boundaries, if I learn how to break through those boundaries, I can feel being nature. I can feel being others in the same way that I feel being this body. So the idea that I am this body is an illusion. And then nature and other people feel different. So by breaking these boundaries in a healthy way with the spiritual work, we start realizing I'm not this body. I am also nature because I feel it. I am also the other person because I feel it. A first step is the empathy that we start feeling. We start feeling other people's sorrow or joy. But that can be deepened to the extent that we become the other person or nature. Again, in a healthy way. There are pathological examples of that too.
And Light on the Path talks about in their tears till the eyes have no tears. And that's part of it. That's that compassion, that the tears aren't dried up, or they're not, it's not me. That's not the no tears they're talking about. They're talking about the tears that knowing that you and I feel, I hear, I'm with you, that I understand. It's a better understanding than just a boundary put up.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we are going to send the recording and the link to Dos's talk, and we'll do it right away. So thank you everybody for participating, for being here with us, and we hope you can come next week. So have a very nice week.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Thank you.